in a car. She came back home, moved back into the house with her parents and her younger brothers and sisters, and got a job teaching school at the same school she had attended. She would walk down to school every morning, about a 1.5 mile walk from home, teach school all day, walk back home in the afternoon. She was a walker in more than just name. She taught for several years, and then the Second World War came along. When the war came along, my father was 41 years old. He tried to volunteer to be in the Army. All they told him was that he was too old, and besides that, even if he hadn't been too old, he had a crippled leg. But my dad had spent his early years camping and hiking and hunting and being a scoutmaster. And so for his community wartime service, my dad was trained and taught Red Cross first aid classes. Part of that job was to travel around to all the schools in rural areas and teach first aid classes to the teachers and to any parents who wanted to come at night, so that if the war came close to home, we would know how to take care of one another. Finally, time came for my dad to teach the class at Fines Creek School, the school where my mother taught. I'm not sure whether it happened on the night of the first class or whether it took more time than that. But one night, my daddy offered my mother a ride home after class. My mother got in his 36 Plymouth, and I think they just kept going. She fell in love with her first car, and luckily for me, it happened to belong to the man who would become my daddy. When my mother and dad ran away and got married, they ran about 1.5 miles from Fines Creek to Lower Fines Creek. In a year or two, my brother and I started to come along and make a whole family. And when we were little guys growing up, my mother took a vacation for several years from teaching. She didn't teach school from the time I was born until I got to the 2nd grade, and my little brother Joe was in kindergarten. Now that we were old enough to go to school, my mother announced to my daddy one day that she would like to go back to teaching school because, after all, she had worked her way through college and she was ready to do that for the rest of her working life. My dad said that's a good thing. It's a good thing to be a school teacher. It's a fine thing. But he said, you know, Lucille, the world has changed. And if you're going to go back to teaching school now, it would be a good thing if you would learn to drive. So my mother, now 25 years old, never having ridden in a car until she got in my daddy's car in her early 20s, my mother was going to learn to drive. There was nobody to teach her except my dad. There was nothing to do with us, 2 little boys, ages 5 and 7, but to let us ride in the back seat of the car and help. And so here we go, in a now 1948 Plymouth, 6-cylinder, straight drive with a clutch, headed out for the driving lessons. It was a wonderful thing to watch. Here was my mother. She had a grip on the steering wheel that was so hard that that steering wheel had finger impressions in it when we traded the car 2 years later. Here was my daddy sitting in the front with a big grin on his face, trying to explain to her with his logic how to work 3 pedals with 2 feet, and she couldn't quite get the math to come out right. I was sitting in the back seat watching everything. My little brother was the rest of the show. In those old days with no seat belts, he was not sitting up in the car seat. No, he was down in the floorboard of the back seat on his back, kicking the back of her seat as hard as he could with both